mouth. Word of mouth. Word of mouth. Word of mouth. Word of mouth.
Gentlemen, welcome to Word of Mouth Podcast on Visual Street. How are we doing today?
We're doing great.
Doing awesome.
And I'll just to the folks out there, this is podcast style, conversation with cameras, and we just want to show you what the tripod of services of all three can offer. First, I'm going to start with a good friend of mine, Sercio Campos from Ant Marketing.
Mm-hmm.
How
Pleasure
are you?
to meet everyone. This is pretty good because I feel that at least in the enterprise space, there's an absence of this going on
media-wise.
Yeah, I think there is podcasts, but they seem very stale. It doesn't feel like Joe Rogan. It doesn't feel like any of these new modern shows. It always feels like, hey, we're at a desktop and we're talking about tech and what needs to move forward versus just having a conversation.
Yep. And so we also are sitting down with Johannes Hirsch from Promonio. And Johannes, tell us what your end of the tripod looks like.
My end of the tripod is more the strategic front end, where you talk about a company and what their goals are and where they want to grow, and help them put together a strategy, help them figure out what works, what doesn't. And like Sercio, I love this format because normally it's kind of done in this businessy style, and this is much more informal, and it's actually talking to real people about their problems versus I'm telling them how great I am. And so I'm excited to go into this.
Usually marketing and advertising in any company, it's like Instagram. You show the best of the best, and this is what we can do. And there's a curtain show. Don't worry about how the sausage is made. But I feel like podcasts are great, in long form, and you can take them into little snippets, and you can, kind of talk about certain things, right, that are great,
right.
15, 30 seconds, even a minute long. But as entrepreneurs and business owners and founders, you go through a lot, and times can be a little lonely sometimes trying to figure it out. But the more you do this, the more you can kind of learn from each other and feed off each other. Johannes, you've been in business for a long time and producing and servicing companies. Tell me a little bit about your background and context.
Well, my background is actually, like you said, in business for quite a couple of decades now, and mostly as an COO and CMO. And one of the things I realized is that a lot of companies are really flying blind when they're trying to produce B2B pipeline. Mm-hmm. And that got intensified after COVID, because after COVID, all bets were off. You couldn't go to events. Suddenly, digital became the way to go. A lot of companies weren't familiar with it. And because they were going digital, they now got a ton of analytics, and they didn't know how to measure their performance, what contributes to revenue and what doesn't. And so in the last 2 years, there's been a lot of innovation, and, present company included, where people are reinventing the way B2B marketing is being done and B2B demand gen is being done. And, I solve a particular problem in that continuum, like you said, the tripod, and super exciting because there's just a lot of innovation coming out, and I'm in the middle of it. So,
Johannes, you've been at it for a long time. You without going any deeper, but you could easily be hanging out, retired in Boca Raton and playing golf. I don't know what you do on the side, but you love business. You love helping businesses and people. Like, what made you start a newer chapter in your life at this point?
It's actually a great question. I did retire. I'm 68. I did retire 3 years ago. And about 3 weeks into it, got bored stiff. And one of the things that was always on my bucket list that I had never done was a software company startup. I had worked for a lot of entrepreneurs and always thought, I'm just as good or smart as they are. And then I was like, okay, now it's time to prove it. Mm-hmm. And so that's what led to the launching of Promonio and the launching of this approach. And it's built on 10, 20, 30 years of experience of realizing what didn't work in the prior approaches. And so we're trying to solve this problem by helping people go through a structured goal setting and structured revenue growth planning process. So this is, beat sitting on the couch and watching TV. So I'm having fun.
What was your moment? Like, what was the moment that where
How
you were
long
like,
were you retired before you're like, I can't sit on this couch anymore?
No, I wanted to see what spurred the business Promonio. Like, what was the like moment that made you say like this could be a business?
Well, actually, they both are connected. I mean, I was sitting on the couch and I was getting bored, and a good friend of mine, very sadly, developed early onset Alzheimer's, and it became clear to me that one of the things I needed to do is keep myself challenged.
Stay sharp.
And stay sharp. And then I started scrounging around for a problem to solve, which led to your question. And the problem really is, if you think about most organizations, they're spending a lot of money on analytics. The problem ends up being they have one of three issues. Either they don't have good data, whoever put the data into their CRM tool didn't know what they were doing, or they put the wrong data in, what have you. So the data foundation they have is murky. Best AI analytics doesn't help you. Or more often than not, here in the Bay Area, they go into a brand new space. And for example, one of our customers was a crypto company that there is no prior data. So analytics, by definition, is always backwards looking. So how do you run your data? And or thirdly, a lot of companies are on a turnaround stage, and so they might have data, but it's irrelevant because they got to pivot or something didn't work. And so now suddenly the majority of Silicon Valley startups basically enter a market without any prior data that they can use to forecast what they're going to do. And so I thought, well, somebody needs to solve that problem because most companies have that problem. And so we developed a structured approach that allows companies to go through a rapid experimentation and adjustment process so that they can hit their targets with a high degree of reliability, even though they're charging out into the unknown. And that's the process we developed.
So how long, I mean, we're taking, so in Web 2.0, data is basically data mining is what most of the bigger companies do in tech. You're talking about Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all the big companies in the world. They have so much, LinkedIn has so much data. And now I think in Web 3.0, it's like, what do we do without data? How can we use it for ourselves? Or how can we build communities in a network, right? Is that where we're at right now? Or are we in the infancy?
We're kind of in the infancy. I mean, the big difference between Web 2.0 and Web 3.0 in the B2B marketing space is that you're actually starting to track each lead and each lead event through individually. In the past, all of the lead events have been tracked as averages. You look at weekly, monthly, quarterly averages versus I track, what Sercio did on LinkedIn and so forth. And that's, I think, opens up a whole new world, and then you add to that the fact that you have platforms like LinkedIn or Twitter or what have you, that where you can now begin to use them for business outreach, and that just reinvents the entire game.
How did you connect with Sercio? How long have you guys known each other? And
over a year now.
Well over a year. We actually worked with the same customer, and I started working with them, and I'm like, this is hot stuff. And it was a perfect complement to what I was doing because I was developing a quantified strategy for how to grow. And then customers said, okay, great. I now have a strategy, but I need somebody to help me get the pipeline, implement this stuff so I get paying customers. And this is where AMP came in. And we have since then collaborated on several projects together.
Yeah, that was our first customer.
Yeah. And so for context, where do you come from in the tech world? You've worked on Dropbox, right? Giraffe, Sky Giraffe.
Yeah.
Who else?
I almost worked at a zoo.
That's just your weekend job.
Wait,
before the giraffe, I was cleaning elephant.
Inside the cage or outside the cage? But anyway.
That's just your. Don't tell your. It's about your. That's your home.
Yes.
Hobby cleaning up after.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in tech for about 17 years, give and take, and I think at every company that I've been at, it's been a startup. Dropbox was they were 500 employees, but if I was their first enterprise hire to go after the enterprise. But I've always had the obstacle, and every company faces this, is the GTM, the go-to-market. How do you get new leads? How do you convert these leads? And it's always a battle. It's marketing versus sales. And so how do you navigate that? And that's what I've been doing for the last 17 years, is working. And I think now more than ever, it was a tug of war, I feel, with marketing and sales. And I feel now we're at this point, this inception point in B2B marketing and sales, where now there needs to be collaboration, because your best marketers are your salespeople. And even if you were to take that a step further, you could say your best marketers are your whole company. Like everyone, I mean, when you go to a dinner party or you go meet, people are talking about their work. They're telling people they don't know about what your company does. And I think now with Web 3.0 or 2.0, and we have that data, and to Johannes's point, it's making the right decisions with that data. Whereas before it was about an infinite number of people to go after. Where now with the data, we can actually go after a finite number and be very, very, very precise on our messaging, on our intent, or even if it's just to build a relationship, you can do that. You can't do that. You can't build relationships at scale.
Right. And you shouldn't. I mean, you know, now since we've been, you know, doing the marketing on LinkedIn, and way over a year ago when you came with that idea that you and your partner came up with, I thought it was great because I was already using LinkedIn in a different way from most. I wasn't trying to get like one specific job. I just wanted to build a network, and I built a network one by one. But I wasn't really doing much with it. And the next level was to invite them to the studio. And we came up with an idea to do a podcast. And that was kind of like the aha moment where it's like, okay, you know what, if we can do an event or somewhere where we can meet, it's like the equivalent of like getting lunch together or coffee, then they'll see what we do. And to take those online network and bring them into real life, that's the key. That's where you build real businesses and real relationships. I mean, before internet days, how were you reaching people?
Phone.
Yeah, phone or events.
But you couldn't events, right?
Yeah,
you couldn't cold call somebody. I mean, to get to like a CISO or...
You probably could.
Back in the day, yeah. In fact, there were whole classes taught on how do you get past the administrative assistant.
Yeah.
That was the big game.
Yes,
you know,
how do you
totally.
Right?
How do you befriend the gatekeeper so that he or she then sets up the meeting with the boss? And nowadays, you know, that first of all, most of those people don't have gatekeepers anymore. And now you can, like you said, you know, through stuff like what AMP does through LinkedIn, you can reach them directly. So now it's a whole different ballgame. It's not about buttering up the secretary. It's about talking to the guy at a high level. Yeah.
And bringing real value, though. And this is my stick, like with LinkedIn, and you're starting to see it more. There's more companies and services offering LinkedIn marketing that brings leads. And I'm seeing a lot of automation, which I've always been, you know, on the fence about. I like the automation that we've been doing with Amped because a human does have to connect and somebody that does know. But I can always tell when the mass messages go out, because in my LinkedIn name, I have a camera emoji on there. And so it says Alonzo camera emoji Oriana. And I'm like, gotcha. At that point, it's like, I don't mind it so much, but I feel like there's some levels that you need to like get in there, and it's cheapening the relationship from the start, you know?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of this kind of automatic outreach where it's clear, especially I accept an invite and then 2 seconds later I get a message. Okay, that was automated. But the piece where I think you come in is if you want to now reach the senior decision maker directly, and by the way, you don't want to use sort of a, hey, I got 5 pounds of software, do you want to buy it? Sales pitch. You have to put out the honey. You have to put out something that they find interesting. And there's also, and I think maybe this might be more your background, there's a proliferation of formats. How do I engage people from podcast to video to blog to a Medium article, whatever it might be, and being able to pull all those registers with the right people at the right time is non-trivial. And that's one of the reasons why you're sort of the third leg of that tripod.
Yeah, I feel it. I mean, you know, I've always felt the way, you know, I realized this because when I first started doing video and social media was on the rise, especially with companies, I saw an opening where I said, you know what, I told my wife, or soon-to-be wife, I said, what if I go and shoot 2 or 3 companies every morning, right, for like an hour and a half, and then edit in the afternoon, and then the next day, you know, when we finish, we could post the videos, we can post the photos on Facebook at the time. And nobody was doing that at that time. And I came to learn the term later from Sercio that it was service content as a service, which was an ongoing thing. And I had 3 clients, and I was able to leave my company at the time, and I did this, and I had a 300 square foot office, and I even stayed there most of the time, and I loved it, and I was living out my dream for the money that I was okay with, and then just started to get busier, and I needed an editor, and then I needed somebody to help with production, and so we were starting to do this at a bigger scale. And now, from 7 years ago, it has changed because you need people that know exactly what they're doing. You can't just post a video on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn and just leave it there and hope for the best. You need the analytics. You need the marketing that directly goes to where it should. So it's not just lost time, lost space. Right.
I think part of it is also, I agree, but part of it is also the informality of the content. And it's a funny mix of professionalism and informality.
Yes.
If I sit there and I talk into my iPhone, it doesn't quite cut it. On the other hand, though, and this is what I like about the idea you talked about last time, is the whole democratization of video production. How do you help people promote themselves, but not with a $20,000 video budget, but something that they can do? It's a step up above recording yourself on the iPhone, but it maintains this informality like what we have in this setting, because that's what people connect with.
Right.
And it speaks to them, so maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, creating content. I mean, obviously everybody wants to go digital and do more of that stuff, but I just shot for Master, and I can say it, but Masters of Scale podcast, Reed Hoffman, they were out of New York, the producers who was interviewing, and they did it all on Zoom, but they needed somebody local with good audio, because, a podcast, you better have some good audio. If it's really bad audio or if it drops off, it just takes you out of it. It really does. Bad production takes you out of it. And yes, you can get the content across, but it does so. I went to Google, put a mic there, SM7B. It took me 6 minutes to set up with the little recorder, and it was money. I sent it within an hour, got paid, all good, and it's professional, right?
I think that's great, and because you end up having, depending on what stage the company is in, if they're a small startup or a turnaround, they want to get the $200 budget. The guys in the middle want the $2,000. Yeah, exactly. And then the big guys, they can afford the $20,000.
And I can tell you, with all the companies that we work with, when I meet with them, and now we're at a size where we start talking to customers about their 3 to 6 month marketing plan, because we want to make sure that that's mirrored into LinkedIn, and how do they strategically do that. So some companies that are over 100 employees, they may have a game plan. Other companies that are smaller are almost, not month to month, but maybe 45, 60-day plans. And when you say, oh, well, we need content, we don't have any.
Right.
And so there's this, I feel like there is a gap in the market for content creation in the B2B world, because it doesn't exist. If you look at Instagram, it's a feed of people on their iPhone or photos. It's not at the level where Instagram or YouTube, or there may be actually I think the big brand names, but on the lower end there's not much. And I think B2B is missing an opportunity when we talk about content creation, because and it's almost a dilemma for them, because they've been this professional persona for so long. They're having identity issues.
And they don't have an online presence, so that's the biggest thing. And what we found during COVID is like marketers and companies that are used to having events and building that camaraderie for internal and external, it was missing. They were trying to do as much as they could on Zoom, but as we know, there's such a thing as Zoom fatigue, right? So what can we do to kind of step up to that? And I think the great companies were kind of just building behind the scenes, so when we do open up, and then hopefully this role keeps going, that we're ready to go. The work that Visual Street was doing, this room wasn't built before COVID, and we built it knowing that we were going to be doing events again, and that we were going to have, I was tired of companies watching our videos on our phone, and I said, let's have like a stage with the projector, and we can premiere their videos and have a little party for them, and so we were already thinking about that, but doing content as a service, there's different ways. Like a podcast is great because it's long form, but you can also take little teasers of it and edit them. And it's kind of like the first step into content.
Right.
When you see, then you could do some green screen stuff or do profiles on customers or do profile videos on employees. We all want to attract and retain employees as much as possible. Everybody's moving around so much. So I think the media really helps. I mean, companies, we did a lot in the trades, and we did a lot of videos to attract people. Like, why would you want to work at this company? It's not just about the paycheck anymore. It's about having a little bit of freedom and flexibility. It's about having passion and loving what you do and having the flexibility to kind of not just be a robot, right? I think, especially the younger generations want that more than ever, right? Right now, the office spaces, they're going to look different. You want more outdoor space, right? You don't want to be in cubicles. So what are you seeing right now in returns? I mean, you're having some fast growth, and a lot of people believe in what Amped is doing. What is some of the feedback from these companies that aren't used to doing what you're doing?
I think, like I mentioned earlier, it's a new world for them. I almost feel there's a little bit of stage fright when companies make that. It's this social is just so different than in corporate communication because the channels have been there for so long, the behaviors have been there so long, so that when they go to social, we work with very seasoned salespeople that close, multi-million-dollar deals and can approach anybody in person. But the moment comes up on social where there's an interaction, they don't know how to engage. It's what do I say? What do I do? They do after a little bit, but I feel that there's this stage right now of enterprise companies that are very slowly making that move, and the feedback from them is they need help. They need a lot of help, and I think working with content creation that's meaningful to their customers is huge. Yeah. We and Scott will talk about it later, but the hypothesis that we have is that that if you talk to somebody on LinkedIn about something that they care about, they're gonna talk to you, and so you got to carry that dialogue. And I think that carrying the dialogue is tough for companies because they immediately, I have David Hawk, who's an advisor, he puts it this way: the Amped approach is like a falling feather. Standard enterprise is like a brick. And the moment that there's a sign that they want to buy, they just throw that brick and say, let's go for a meeting. Let's try to get to the next step. When in reality, you got to fall with them. You got to go back. And that's, I think, the human behavior aspect that needs to change.
That's been the biggest change for you as well, because you have like a long-standing sales background where this was the framework and this was you had a playbook, right? And so now you're having to kind of dance a little bit, and it's fine. I think that's the way I've always grown my business, and I don't say like, hey, buy my video, you need video. Like I'm just beyond that, or not beyond that. It's just that's not the way I do sales. A lot of them come from referrals, and that's been the greatest thing. But we're lucky that we produce what we produce because people see our work and they say, hey, who did that? It's kind of easy, in that way.
I think there is another part to it that we can add. Part of what we're talking about is really a shifting of control from the salesperson, going after the customer and trying to get them to buy, to on the internet, and especially in social, the buyer, the customer, has control. They decide when to engage with you. They can choose. Quite often you get them very late in the consideration cycle. In the old days, you call them up and he had never thought about what he wanted, now or she. Now, by the time they walk in the store or they show up on your site or they talk to the salesperson, they have checked you out. They know the pricing, they know the competition, they know what they want.
Yeah.
And this general theme of turning control over to the customer, to the prospect, is this technology that we're starting to use now, and we'll be using it with you, which is put out by a company called Go Tolstoy, and it's interactive videos. You've been seeing it more in the B2C world, where customers can interact with the video. But basically, interactive video means two things. One is you, inside the video itself, have a set of navigation options. So now the user, can decide what I'm going to watch. I don't have to sort of watch the entire video linearly. I can decide, I can jump and I go here and I watch, something that interests
You
me.
choose your own adventure.
You choose your
Yes.
own adventure. But there's a second part to it, and that's rarely used, but I'm super excited about it. Inside the video screen, there is actually a set of ghosted icons. You can now respond live to the video.
Oh, wow.
And I get it.
Ah.
So you watch my video, you click, you're watching these, you're interested in topics 3, 5, and 7, so you pick those. And now you want to say something, you click on, record and send a message back, and I get it. We now have a video dialogue.
And that's live. So let's say it's a
live.
week from now, you put it out, you'll get a notification saying
Correct.
that somebody is engaging with you like they
Correct.
do on social media. So it's bringing that whole social aspect
To the
Oh, I
video.
love
It'd be
video
really
side.
funny if they
Yeah,
could pick
yeah.
up your audio. Like, when the application, not Tolstoy, but maybe something else pops up and you're like, shit. I
I
gotta
know
fill
that.
this thing out again. I just filled this out, and then the little pop, like that'd be great because that's really transparent.
Yeah, no, they have to push a record button.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're kind of in violation of a few laws.
Yes.
But yeah.
For 10, 12 years now doing video, it's always been like, people, it's expensive to do a higher end production, and there's different levels, right? It's,
Right.
all the way from Hollywood videos, Hollywood commercials to, like one guy with the camera and an iPhone, right? You can do that. It's just different levels, right?
Yeah.
But people have always, especially before when they don't know about video, they want to throw the whole kitchen sink and they want to talk about everything. And it's like, this is going to be like a 20-minute video. Like, who's going to watch this? So I love, and so with that, everybody's like, oh, we have to do quicker videos. We only have this amount of time. I love the fact that what you're bringing to the table and that you can pick and choose and you can have something that's leading, right? A little teaser, a little trailer. And if you guys want to hear the longer podcast, you can hear more. If you want to hear specific parts, you will hear that, and this is in the title, right? So I equate that. I always ask people, it's like, hey, have you ever been to a movie theater for 6 or 7 hours straight? Have you? No?
No, I haven't.
Maybe when I was little, I
Not
saw
yet.
like 2 movies in a row or something.
And I won't ask you because I already know the answer, but have you ever binge watched Netflix,
Yes.
Game of Thrones or something for 6, 7 episodes?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. And what's the difference?
Yeah, well, that's under my control. I can watch, eat, pause, leave, come back.
Like Days of Thunder controls an illusion.
Yeah.
But it is funny.
Yeah.
I mean, you binge. You're like, man, I'm really into this. I want to watch more. And when the season ends, you're like, oh, I couldn't even imagine waiting a whole week to watch something. But now they're starting to roll that out too. When they roll series out,
Yeah.
Once they're done, you can binge watch them all. But they'll come out once a week or twice a week.
I kind of like it more like that.
Yeah, I'm cool. It kind of keeps you more engaged. It is cool. But then at the end, you can choose.
It's about control. Tomorrow I'm going to put out. I found this post that talks about some data that YouTube collected, and one of the things they're realizing is that the engagement rates in chaptered videos, meaning you can identify where the chapters are, so you can jump around,
Yeah.
is much higher than in just a linear feed.
Control, right?
It's control. But again, it goes back to that larger theme, putting out the honey, approaching people with something that they might be interested in versus trying to go after them with a fly swatter, trying to get them to buy.
What I really like about this format, and I've done this with Alonzo before, is that we may get an hour of audio and video, but you can chop that up. There's going to be 50 golden nuggets in this conversation.
And that's what
use-
happens when
right,
it's
right,
when it's organic like this, right?
Yeah.
If we were reading from something, it may not happen this way.
There's
right
nothing.
now,
There's no golden nuggets.
Yeah.
The inspiration. And this is where I think CEOs, especially at startups, need to do something like this because
more approachable.
Such a great quality, yeah.
it just brings them out. They can use one podcast, do one podcast recording, talk about how they founded the company, talk about hires, and then HR can send this, like, here's a great video about why we're looking for people like you. Boom. Here's the reason why our CEO created this company, or this and that. But and then on top of that, you have the data from you to make sure that it's going to the right person.
right?
Which is so with
targeting,
Promonio, it's not just social, it's every outreach. And how does that lead to revenue, which is, being a part of half a dozen startups and working with, over a dozen or two right now. it's almost this guessing game that they
Is that
play.
the biggest question? That people have is like, how is it for me? It's like, how is this video going to make me money? You know, and my biggest thing is like, or what I say is like, hey, look at Nike, look at McDonald's, like branding. Branding is what it is, but it's hard to measure. I mean, you can measure how many people watch it.
So I think when companies, their biggest obstacle up front is finding product market fit. So understanding who does this product sell to, who resonates with this solution that we've figured out. Companies don't know how to exactly identify those people today. Even companies that have been doing it for a while, they don't know. They do this mass email or mass calling campaign and hope that the person that they're about to talk to is going to say, "Oh yeah, I need that." But if you put a piece of content in front of somebody and you know that's the person that's going to buy your stuff in the next 24 months.
Yeah, because you know they're interested in that, right?
Yeah.
Maybe they've already engaged. So how are you engaging that right now? You said, like, let's say a crypto company that hasn't been around. It's financial, right? There's a history of financials and having new to market services, or, you know, crypto is a whole different game. But, you know, how are you convincing them or proposing it to them that hey, we can do something where we can try it out for a couple of months and you'll have something at least to sink their teeth into?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. In terms of your first question of, you know, does everybody want to know how much money they make out of it? They do want to know. The problem is they don't know how to get the answer. And a lot of times they collect the wrong data, the analytics tools aren't there, and therefore they're flying blind in terms of, you know, I'm investing all this money into ads or events or, you know, videos, whatever it is, and I don't really know whether or not it's producing me revenue. And there's a big difference between the B2C world, where sort of branding and more emotional appeal is much more asked for, versus the B2B world, where you by and large are dealing with reasonably rational professional buyers. And this is sort of the point then to what exactly do they want and what are they looking for. And, you know, these are smart people, and they know their field and they know what they need. And in order to figure that out takes a little bit of research. Some of it is quantitative. You crawl through their CRM data and you find out which job description, which title, which geography, which company size, whatever has the highest resonance, you know, where do you have the highest close rates. But some of it is also qualitative, where you go on events or you talk to the salespeople. I always love to talk to the salespeople because they're in real life. And I asked them, I said, go through the last 5 deals, and when you close the deal, when in the conversation did the guy's eyes light up? You always know as a salesperson when you made the sale emotionally. What was that moment? Tell me. And what did they resonate with? And that starts telling you a lot about why people are really buying. And, you know, it's not the sort of marketing blather about, you know, we're at the intersection of this and that. It's, you know, very concrete needs quite often. And this is then where social comes in, because you can validate those hypotheses with very inexpensive experiments. Like, for example, Amped, or you guys produce 2 quick videos. One is about less filling and the other one is about taste great, and we send it both to the same demographic. And 3 days later, we get the open rates or the click-through rates or the engagement rates, and you know whether people are, you know, which demographic resonates with what. And so you go through these very rapid, controlled experimental cycles where you optimize what works and what doesn't. And that's part of our approach. You know, we set up an initial target assumption: who's going to buy, why, how big are they, how much do we need to reach them, blah, blah, blah. But then we go through a rapid validation process, kind of with AMP, for example, where we then try out different messages, different demographics, different approaches. You know, I'm going through this right now with one of my situations where we're learning that, for example, CEOs of shrinking companies are responding very differently than CEOs of fast-growing companies. Unless you have that sort of data, you wouldn't know the difference. Now we're developing campaigns that target to each of those 2 demographics very differently, with a different message and so forth. That's really what it is, and that's kind of when we talk about putting out the honey, you know, meet them where they're at with the problem they have, versus, hey, do you want to buy from me? Hey, do you want to buy from me? Hey, do you want to buy from me? Which is, you know, 90% of the approaches.
I feel like we're living in this golden era that's about to change into Web3. That's going to be growing more communities that we didn't have the information before. Before, if you wanted to sell a product, you had to have all these focus groups, and many of them, and they did this in the movies, right, too, like see how people reacted, and then they would edit the movie depending on how they acted. Now, we're on our phone and we're telling them what we like, where we're going, what products we're buying. Right, the ABC testing has changed, and the data's there. And a lot of the times, people are scared and worried and upset that our data's going. We don't know where it's going. But it could be used for good. And like our last presidential race, without getting political, it could be used for bad too. Right. So data is there. I mean, most of the stuff that I get market sponsored ads are things that I'm interested in. Like
surprisingly, sometimes
you're like, how did you know I wanted that camera?
Yeah,
I think I said it once to one of my guys. And so scary as that may be, I don't mind it as much.
To your sorry, Johannes. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think there is a backlash to the sort of
data mining,
and then the minute you look for lawnmowers once, now the next 2 weeks on your computer, all you get is lawnmower ads, and people are tired of it. And the Web 3.0 portion of it is really where you can start democratizing who runs these communities. I mean, where before it would be the Facebooks, the Instagrams, and the Twitters of the world. And by the way, I'm not trying to make statements about those companies. They do a great service, but ultimately it's still some form of centralized control versus I can now create my own community. And I can basically own this. The community becomes an NFT, and this is sort of where the Web 3.0 world is going to revolutionize things. It's going to take a while for the business models to sort themselves out, but the opportunities are massive.
Well, I'm excited. I mean, we're doing Discord now, and that's bringing our own community, the people that want to be in there. They're choosing to be there. It's not just everybody. And there's, just like Slack, there's threads that we're talking about NFTs. We're talking about memes. We're talking about production and crews. I have like a job board. So I'm in the infancy. I'm a part of a couple other groups that are doing it well, and it's taking some time, but I want to grow my network that way. And we're going to be talking about things that we want to talk about,
but
not just
you own the platform. That's the big difference.
I mean, I don't own it, but it's my own. There's no.
No, but with Web 3.0, you own the blockchain. You own the blockchain of all the interactions. So this can't be taken away. That's the big difference. I mean, you can sell the rights to it, but it becomes an ownable property.
Right.
What's really interesting too is that if we're thinking about getting more personalized through social today, you actually have to bump that up a little bit more, actually a lot more for Web 3.0, because it's such a closed community. If you don't come with the right approach, you're not going to get let in. And so if you're thinking it from you're a company and you're wanting to get into that, you're going to have to know intimately who your customers are, and then they're going to want to join. It can't be the way that we approach our customers today. Well, I think we're changing, because I see that with social, but I think the social, LinkedIn, Facebook, it's just the first step. I think companies have to pivot into the sense of, how do I really start to know my customers? Because it's working with several companies, there's certain terms that are shared on their go-to-market, and there are some similarities. When it's security, I mean, that's the hardest space right now, because you can't differentiate yourself with, maybe you can with some technology. There's one company that I'm working with that just got into they got a sandbox award at RSA. So it's the coveted award at this security conference in San Francisco. They're doing blockchain authentication on the back end. Really cool stuff.
There's a huge history in that. I mean, there's a lot of money being lost and taken away because of the security is not any high level security.
But that's a cool technology, very unique. You get the value prop like that.
Right.
Most companies don't have that. Most companies, it's just a better mousetrap. And so how do you really differentiate yourself? And that's where I think companies have to go from social and really start thinking about 3.0.
What are you seeing, and why are you loving LinkedIn right now? And how long can we utilize LinkedIn? Does it need to change a little bit more? I feel like they are kind of the last kid to get picked, right? But I think they're making some moves, and people are starting to realize the power of LinkedIn and the data mining that they've been doing for quite a few years. The fact that Microsoft bought them, I think that has something to do with kind of being, testing things a little bit longer than most, or going to market a little bit later. What are you seeing on LinkedIn that you're really liking?
It's the level of the participation. People are spending a lot more time on it's being more of a really social platform than it was before. Whereas it used to be, I think maybe 2-3 years ago, it wasn't. It was more updates. Now I'm seeing a lot more content. I'm seeing sometimes you see controversial things, and that's fine. But I really do feel that the engagement level is getting richer on LinkedIn, which gets people in there, and that's what they want. But ultimately, in our line of business, that's where we want to be. And so figuring out how to get in that line, I think is the exciting part.
Johannes, what's the cons to that approach? I mean, I'm seeing some things that people normally would have put on Facebook, and they're putting on LinkedIn. And yes, I do want to see your babies because I care about you, and but there's certain things that it's a little much. I want to hear about your business. I want to hear about what's going on, what's new ideas. Like I don't want it to just be a whole political conversation on there. I can go to Facebook for that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a self-publishing platform like all the other social platforms, and so you can't really control content. And I don't know what their content filtering operation looks like, but I'm sure it's massive. But with that said, I think the core strength you get out of LinkedIn is really 2 or 3-fold. One is it allows you to precision target the people. The thing we talked about earlier, you can go out and advertise to 80 million people, or you can find the 200 that are your buyers. And I think that's a huge benefit that LinkedIn offers. Once you know who they are, then the second piece is between their advertising platform and the ability to post, and also the fact that you can outreach to them and connect with them. You can actually very precisely then go and approach the people that you want to be with. Yeah. Now, the part where you're straying into the thing that you talked about earlier is a lot of times people are too salesy in their approaches, and or they're too mercenary, and that's a big no-no. So back to what we've been talking about throughout this entire thing, put out the honey, give them control, and connect with them, let them approach you. You just put it out there versus you kind of going chasing after them, because that's the quickest way to get turned off.
Hurry up and buy. This is what I have. I can't. Oh, man. Yeah. And I get so many of those messages, man. And
LinkedIn is the long game. Yeah. It's not about getting the meeting right now, or it's not even about getting the meeting. It's about building a relationship. And if that person, when they're ready, will raise their hand and let you know. Yeah. I think
it's kind of like a cocktail party, right? Like you don't go up like at a cocktail party, like, hey, how are you? Here's my card.
Yeah.
Later.
Part of the I work with several B2B customers, and we look at all the avenues where they're generating their pipeline from events to email to cold calling, whether it's by the SDRs or by the sales reps, to inbound referrals, you name it, ad campaigns, retargeting, and what have you. And then, of course, LinkedIn is always in there, either the ads or the outreach, the stuff that AMP does. And if we then compare which of those principal sources of pipeline or of leads have the highest performance, it's almost always LinkedIn. Events are dead or deadish. Most sales guys don't want to hit the road anymore and make in-person sales call, because I can make 5 Zoom conferences or 10 Zoom conferences in 2 days, or I can visit one customer by traveling there and going back. It's hideously unproductive. And COVID has driven home that you can sell through Zoom or through video conferencing. And LinkedIn is sort of one of the few alternatives that's still working. Who opens his spamming filter? Everybody has a spam filter. So email, as a late in the funnel medium to connect with somebody that expects your connection, is great. But as an early funnel where you're trying to establish a connection, establish a relationship, it's terrible. And so LinkedIn has kind of carved out a place in that B2B lead funnel where it's really more effective than almost all the other alternatives combined. And in particular, the outreach that as long as it's the stuff that we've been talking about, talk about their problem that you put out the honey, don't go after the fly swatter.
Let's talk numbers. What's the opening rate right now on LinkedIn, average?
So there's not an opening rate. There's an engagement rate. So that means people engage, so they reply. And that can go from just a thumbs up to a full-blown paragraph. But
I mean, that's a step forward. Emails like
click and views.
It's crazy.
Yeah, so we get at Amped, it's 36% engagement.
Wow.
Across. So if you get 100 people, this is across all our customers.
So 1 out of 3 people engage, not just open up and maybe see what you said. They actually engage and you said thumbs up or give you a message back. Yep. That's incredible. Is there anything out there doing the same? Yeah.
Nothing. I mean, email, if you send out 10,000 emails, you get, 10, maybe get 100 opens and you get 10 responses if you're lucky.
Yeah.
With LinkedIn, you're going to get much higher.
Well, we were working with a global company 3 weeks ago, and they told us they sent out 400,000 emails in a campaign and got 200 responses.
What is the number? What are the numbers to that?
That's quarter. It's like quarter of 1%. I even think it's worse than that, but it is so dismal. But they were excited because to them that's 200 meetings. But in reality,
but it's unaffordable. First of all, most companies don't have a 400,000 name database. Second of all, they couldn't afford running the infrastructure to execute that stuff. And
that's just so wide. I feel like if you create a piece of content, specific, like you wouldn't even reach out to that many people. Like that's, I think you're just throwing the ball up. Hopefully somebody catches it.
We can experiment right now. So, and we can chop this up, meaning like Johannes, if you were talking to the CEO that was going up, which I think you said was more relevant to your business, what would you tell them, or how would you engage with them over just a conversation? What would you want them to know after a conversation with you?
The fact that if they go through a structured goal planning process where they basically say, I want to grow to 10 million, 20 million, 100 million, and here's my lead sources, and then in order to execute that, here are the budgets that go along with it, and also here are the KPIs that I'm going to give to my team. How many calls do the SDRs have to make? How much, how many leads does marketing have to generate and so forth? But I have very detailed KPIs so I can monitor. I have an early warning system. The whole reason you track these KPIs is so you have an early warning system. Those are the key ones.
Oh, that's nice. I like the early warning system because usually, you get the warning at the board meeting.
Yeah. I mean,
you should change it to early board warning meeting.
Yeah, early board warning meeting. Yeah, I think the that's a point that a lot of times people don't understand. The traditional sales forecasting process, especially if it's an old style, old school head of sales that demands that the forecast is absolutely valid, and they want your firstborn if you miss your forecast. Guess what? Everybody in the organization sandbags, and then you basically find out what the quarter is going to be like 5 days before it ends. Versus if you treat it as a scientific data collection exercise where you're saying, okay, look, no questions asked, just tell me what's the likelihood. You typically know about 30 days into the quarter, and you get to within plus or minus 10% of where the quarter ends. But those are very different mindsets in terms of how to do forecasting and how to run a B2B sales and B2B pipeline generation operation.
What I really like about that approach is, and this is working 6-7 sales teams, is that the accountability that you put out there isn't all on sales. So
it's across the organization.
So typically when sales teams buy software, it's all on the salespeople.
Yeah.
Like, you got to put in this data, you got to put in this, but
Everybody in the company should be in sales, right? Like everybody is. You're a mouthpiece. You are a representative.
With his software, now sales is going back to marketing and saying, hey, guys, you need to deliver on these 6 things in order for me to so at the end of the quarter, as a sales leader, you can come and say, Mr. Marketing, we got a third of what you said we were going to get, and we hit half the number. Now there's actually the guy missed the number, but there's information here. There's data. There's no guessing.
That's the key piece, because what ends up happening, rather than making it an accusatory conversation where you say, okay, marketing or sales, whatever, failed again, and now it gets all political. Instead, you're saying, we thought we were going to do 100, we did 80, and we looked at why we, missed, and there's 3 areas where we missed, too many meetings, and
I'll blame the marketer.
Whatever. But
why were we having meetings about meetings?
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, the point is, you now have data early in the process. This is the whole idea of around the early warning cycle. You have data early in the process. So that you know what's working and what isn't, and you can course correct in time. Again, you want to course correct the quarter on the 2nd or 3rd week. You don't want to course correct, on July 2nd to find out how Q2 went. And most organizations are in that boat, and this is what predictability really is. But it requires a different planning process, and it requires a different tracking process. But then it also requires the art side of it. Contact the right people.
Yep.
Amped with the right medium and the right message, which is what you guys do. Because when you get the biggest impact I see having on conversion rates and closure rates is targeting the right people with the right message in the right format that they engage with. And you get what I call resonance, where your conversion rates go from 4% to 17%. Your closure rates go from 4% to 17%.
Yeah.
Speaking of
that makes a big difference.
Speaking of messaging, I want to hand over the headset to Amp's co-founder, Scott Wright. I think he has a lot of value, and he's the man of the hour. So
yeah, we'll definitely spend some time on messaging. And while you guys are changing, I want to go ahead. I love what you're doing because it gives content creators, the opportunity to do content as a service, because companies should not just throw everything into, one video, and having the opportunity to break it up and, smaller pieces where it's like an introduction to the company, right? It doesn't have to be the whole spiel, but it's an introduction. It is an intro into what we do, what we love to do, and about us, how we got started. It could be profile videos for internally or externally. It could be little short videos on, why people love working there and to attract new blood into the industry. Or it could be about, just direct products, right? Yeah. The Tolstoy platform and how you're utilizing it, I think is going to be, it's going to really change the game for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, violent agreement. The stuff that you guys are doing is just huge in terms of driving conversion and closure rates. And I sort of tend to spend most of my time, most 2/3 of my time on the science side of things, collecting the data and making sure people have right goals and making sure they measure them. But then it's a little bit like starting a restaurant. Table stakes is you got to have a kitchen, and you got to have a cash accounting system, and you got to have your food deliveries and good sources, and that's all sort of the operational details. Quite often when we start working with companies, getting them onto an executable platform is the goal setting, put the infrastructure in place, right tracking, revenue operations and so forth. But then once that's all done, similar to the restaurant, just because you got a nice stainless steel kitchen doesn't mean you're going to be producing great meals where people come back and they pay $100 a plate. And there's an art side of it. And what I see over and over and over and over is once you're done, most organizations can't get out of their own way because they have bad infrastructure, bad data, bad execution, faulty analytics, and so forth. Once you fix that, that's a necessary but not sufficient condition for growth. At that stage, the sort of a mid-level maturity stage, now it's all about how do I connect? How do I engage with somebody? And this is where you guys come in.
So are you saying like companies are going to have to start rebuilding the foundation of their communication
Uh,
to really kind of
yes, I would say if I see two big problems over and over and over again, it's those two. One is on the science side and one is on the art side. The problem on the science side is it's the rare organization that has good data where ultimately the CEO or the CRO, the CMO can come in and say, number one, where's my business coming from in quantitative terms? How many dollars do I get out of LinkedIn? How many dollars do I get out of Google and so forth? And secondly, what do I need to do next week, next month, next quarter in order to hit my year-end numbers? They typically don't have, with a degree of precision, the kind of data available that allows them to do forward-looking planning. On the art side, very few companies have taken the definition of their ICP, their ideal customer profile, who's going to buy from them, down to a level of granularity that's really concrete so that you can go after a specific demographic versus, market to all engineers or market to all of marketing. There's huge differences. And then secondly, translating that into a compelling value prop and a compelling presentation. And I always talk about it has to be outside in, meaning you talk about their problem, not talk about how great I am. You're interested in my story
right.
as long as I relate to what you want.
Sure.
So I got to understand your problem.
Right.
And that requires research, that requires creativity, and that requires an engaging delivery. And so the art side of it is just as important. And literally, again, once you start measuring this stuff, you get 2x, 3x, 4x the conversion and closure rates by just getting the ICP dialed in and the messaging dialed in,
Right.
compared to sort of the blanket marketing stuff.
Yeah, blanket marketing or just like hard sales.
Yeah,
hurry up and buy.
Yeah.
So we have Scott Wright, co-founder of Amp Marketing, and you were kind of the brains behind the analytics at first, and kind of connecting the dots with some of the automation and using the tools that you were doing. When Sercio came up to me and he said, that you guys were working on this, I was like, okay, I don't know about automation, bro, but I like where you're going because I was already kind of doing stuff. What was the aha moment where you guys realized this could be a service that we offer?
Yeah, so, hey, nice to be on. Thank you for having me. My aha moment actually came early, actually many years ago, when I used to work underneath Sercio as his BDR, and we were talking about hard cold calling, pound sales, right? Well, I came from Yelp making cold calls, where we actually...
They just called me last week.
I'm sure they did, yeah. And I'm probably sure I called you at one time. But yeah, we were chained to our desk from our phones, and we had to make, 80 cold calls a day. We had to make sure we had 2 hours of talk time, set 2 appointments, try and pitch once. And they use those as KPIs to see, like, okay, why aren't you hitting your $20,000 a month quota, right? I didn't like that. I didn't feel like I was really giving anything to that. I didn't feel like I was a part of anything. So I left. I got this job at a startup where Sercio ended up hiring me at the time. And what was interesting is Sercio looks at me and at the time, he's like, yeah, Scott, like you're, he's like, here's a phone system and here's an email system. Go have at it. So I went into the closet. I started making 100 cold calls, but at Yelp, I was calling Bob's Donuts. I was calling Visual Streets Productions. I was calling these other places. Now I'm calling
more specific.
Not only that, but the chief information officer of Verizon.
Oh, wow.
Or, trying to set meetings with those types of people, those high caliber folks. And I just realized it wasn't working. So I tried all kinds of different things. I tried dressing up in suits and even walking into Lyft's offices to try and set meetings. I was trying all kinds of different stuff, meetups, all this whatnot. And all I really, really wanted to do is I'd never, at the time when I was working on Sercio, the company, it was a cybersecurity company. I knew nothing about cybersecurity. I didn't know anything at all. I came from Yelp, right? So like I had no background in cybersecurity. I just wanted to talk to somebody, like not even pitch them, not sell them. I just wanted to like,
have a coffee, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
Give me 15 seconds.
Give me 15 seconds. Like, tell me what you do. Like, even if you're a security engineer or infrastructure architect or you're a security analyst, do you watch that show, Mr. Robot or something? Like, just something. Like, I want to know more about you, right? And it was that passion that I had to sort of get that drove me to start figuring out new ways to talk to people, which in this case at the time, I happened to stumble upon LinkedIn. And at the time, it was very manual, doing all this outreach. But I took that sort of mindset and really applied that when I would connect with people, and I would connect with them, and I'd be like, "Hey, man, like, you're a Splunk architect? Wow!" Like I was wow. I was like, I was curious. Like, tell me more about that. Like, what do you do? What is this part? And they would
Like
tell me.
genuinely interested.
I was
right?
genuinely interested, and
That changes the game.
it really does. And so these people responded really well because LinkedIn is a place where when you come onto it, they're very much, open to being like, hey, you're interested in
People
what I do?
want to connect.
Exactly.
People want to connect on LinkedIn. They're there to connect.
What the platform's used for,
Yeah.
right? So when I did that, I started seeing, oh my God, just tons of people just talking to me. Now, granted, maybe I would, hey, what's the weather like in Arizona or Connecticut or something, right? But that would be my introduction to a conversation and then learning to go there. Well, fast forward, basically, using that sort of same mindset and approach, we figured out how to scale that and realize that there's an art, a little bit of finessing that you need to do, but there's a lot of it that you can sort of scale out and do it with automation and different things like that. It was funny, before we found out about some of the automation, Sercio at the time, when I said a few meetings, he goes, all right, we're going all in on this. And I was like, all right, cool. And so I remember I would take my laptop and I would literally turn it sideways so that my hand would be faster at doing the Command-C, Command-V, copy and paste as I went down and was sending out messages to different types of folks, right? But once we found automation, we take that mindset and that passion of how people like to talk on LinkedIn.
Tell me about the messaging at that point. You're saying
Sure.
you're Command-C, Command-V for anybody that doesn't know, and that's Mac users for sure.
That's
We're
true.
copying and pasting, baby. But the what was the messaging at that point, and how many people were you reaching? Because now they put kind of a cap on that, right?
Yeah. So to talk a little bit on the cap for 2 seconds, which was, I think it was early last year, LinkedIn threw out a rule that basically said you can really only have 100 connection or reach out to 100 people per week. But that wasn't official. It depends on your standing with LinkedIn and so on and so forth. You go by. But before that, it was 100 a day. And so
Yeah.
that was a big difference. But back then, before automation and all this other stuff, my messaging and the approach was how I would want to be, approached. Now, I've never been a security analyst. I've never been a CEO. I've never, done a lot of these
Just in
things.
general as a person, right?
As a person, exactly. You're being genuine. And, I think about, this is no knock to anybody who listens for any MLM, multi-level marketing stuff, but
my network knows about the way I feel about that.
but what I will say is, take that example for a second, right? And think about Facebook, right? And think about, it's probably happened to every one of us at one point or another. You have that friend who reaches out to you and you can read right through it and you're like, oh my God,
I cringe.
Oh, I cringe. I don't want to invite you to my birthday party anymore or something like that, right? Take that concept and really sit with that for a second. Why is that cringe? Well, it's cringe because they're reaching out for their own interests. They're
Right.
not reaching out for your interest, right? And it's like they don't really care about you. They have an agenda that they want to take care of, right? Well, take that same concept and apply it to LinkedIn, and you're being more genuine. Connect with somebody by saying, hey, Johannes, I'm looking to connect with other people that are in, early stage startups. I'm also in an early stage startup, and I would love to pick your brain for a couple minutes if you're ever open to it. Would love to connect and chat, something like that.
What's your message back on that?
Good question.
If he sounds genuine and if it comes across as not kind of a backhanded, self-serving interest, I actually connect, and it's been really interesting. I do a fair amount of this, and I've struck up conversations with folks both here as well as in Europe, where you connect and you actually meet very nice people. You just have to do a little bit of filtering, but I agree. I think the more you look like you're genuine and you're authentic, the more
There's a
likely
way to
you
do
are.
that. And
Yeah.
be genuine. I interview a lot of people, a lot of CEOs, a lot of founders, I just interview a lot of people, and I take, I love Barbara Walters and some of those, some people, there's an art to it, right? And there's a listening. That's the biggest art form. Sometimes, like you just need to just shut the fuck up, right? And just ask some questions. But I think the art form is be genuinely interested, and LinkedIn provides information that you could kind of pick and choose. I mean, your work experience, your interests. The people talk about like what sports. If they went to a certain university, maybe that's a big football school, and it's a guy, and they're kind of I'll talk about that. During the first 15, 20 minutes of interviews, we talk about something that's totally different, and then we find a window to be able to connect, and you see that moment where you were talking about earlier, where they light up and they're like, they start to engage more, and their body changes from doing this to being open, and then they're talking about something that they're really excited about, and there's no trick questions to it, right? They're just talking about what they love. Right?
It's so interesting.
Passion comes through. I love that. I love that moment.
It's so interesting that you say that, because one of the examples that I try to use when talking about this with our clients, and I think I heard you guys talk about something similar, but to your point, Alonzo, is like I think of this meeting somebody at a conference. I don't know if you guys talked about that earlier, right? Or meeting somebody at a conference, or maybe a meetup, or I don't know, a concert, maybe, something where there's sort of this connection that you're going to have.
Third party that brings you together, right?
Exactly. Maybe it's a stand-up open mic night, right? Okay, right? Then you talk about that. But I use the conference aspect because we're talking to, businesses and whatnot. And I say, when you run into somebody at the lunch line, right, and you rub shoulders with them, you start talking, you don't immediately say what you say. Hey, my name's Scott, and I'm the CEO of AMP Marketing. We do business. And here's my card. Turning out law.
That's what people are doing on LinkedIn, by the way, right now.
And that's exactly what they're doing. Exactly, right? And so taking that concept and being genuine, and to your point of where they're all closed up and like, I don't know who this person is, to opening up a lot more. And using the same concept of the conference, you actually just gave me a thought, is like, to your point of how you can read the background of somebody. Like you can almost get some dirt on them, or like look into them before you want to respond. So if I'm a prospect, I can look at the person's profile and be like, this guy knows nothing. Like, or maybe I'll talk to him, right? And I almost think of
MLM, I already know everything I need to know.
Exactly, right? But if they're in a conference, I almost think of like, if you were to be in a conference, you're talking to somebody, but then at the same time, something just pops up next to their head where it just like shows their entire profile, right? And you're like,
man.
oh, you went to school there? That's so crazy. Like, wow, what was that like? So, yeah, it is pretty interesting. But
just in any friendship, like, finding common ground is the key, right? To any long-term relationship. And I think in business, people should treat it as like their personal friendships. I've become really great friends with all our clients. And I can say right now that every client that we're working with, I absolutely love spending time with them. There's not one. I have fired clients. I have, or they have to us, where maybe some things we weren't aligned with, and it usually wasn't the work. And so you don't have to have all the clients that you're absolutely aligned. You can find good, pros and cons to every single one of them. But if you can find a common ground where there's something that brings you together, that you can build something, that's incredible. And that's powerful. I think that's Web3.
Yeah. I would agree. I think there is, kind of infusing a little bit of business reality to the conversation. There's, on one level, I want to do what, he's doing, reach out with an individualized pitch, and I connect with you, and I find out your history, and you're interested in flowers, and I connect with you over that, whatever. Problem ends up with that is, you have a reality, you got a boss or a set of investors that wants you to produce, leads and pipeline and revenue at a certain rate. And you can't spend your entire day researching, whether somebody's interested in flowers or cooking or something. And so the what we came up with is what I would call verticalization at scale, meaning how do I actually then, once I figure out who is interested in what and what the topics are, how do I now build a scalable engine, meaning it's something that's either automated or semi-automated, where I'm still delivering this highly personalized outreach, where I connect with them, and it's outside in, not inside out, meaning I talk about them, I don't talk about me, but I can do it on an automated or semi-automated basis. And the good news there is between tools like LinkedIn or DuckSoup and a few other techniques, I use tools like Shirtivity and Crystal Nose and a few other tools where you can now do this on a semi-automated basis. And then at the back end of that, you end up having something like a Tolstoy where the user gets to pick what they want to see and what they engage with, and the content is engaging and is relevant to what they. Now you suddenly have really, on one level, lift up to these goals that we talked about earlier, make it about them, give them control, make it engaging, put out the honey. But on the other hand, you actually have something that can scale.
Yeah.
So that you're not sitting here doing individualized outreach and it doesn't, you run out of day before you have connected enough people. And that's the art. That's the
That's interesting. You put a word to it, and I think I've been looking for a word to it. You said, I think you said, what was it? Verticalization.
Verticalization at scale.
That's a great point. So yeah, going back to it, it's like doing this personal outreach and talking about, wow, I know what your favorite flower is, or whatever this may be. It's hard to do, right? And to the point, you got your boss breathing down your neck. I think verticalization at scale. It's a great way to put it. So if you're reaching out to people who sell snowplows or something, right? Maybe coming at them with an open-ended question to strike it up, being like, hey, with global warming, is this going to be able to affect your sales as you go with snowplows? Or so, I don't know, something like that that's sort of scalable to that extent. And then being able to ask sort of open-ended questions that might be able to sort of qualify this person pre-hand before you actually get in front of a meeting and be able to know some stuff. Verticalization at scale. I'm going to take that, Johannes. That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah.
Before I interview people, I really just look at their LinkedIn. If I have a chance, I'll look at their other social media. But LinkedIn is so powerful on that. I can literally, if somebody's from, Dallas, Texas, and it's, a guy my age maybe.
Yeah.
And you can see if they're really from there or if they just went to college there.
Yeah.
If you see their other schools are from there, they're usually going to be like a Dallas Cowboy fans, and I'll say so I'm a Niner fan. Well, how do you feel? And so that strikes up the conversation and kind of makes you feel familiar.
Yeah.
And then after that, we get into, I'll find a window and we can talk about. How your business is a team sport, right? So connecting the dots that way, and then you strike up, an organic conversation where you can get the little tidbits, the golden nuggets that Sercio and I like to talk about. But scaling that, there has to be a personalization, and it doesn't, and you can scale that as well. It doesn't have to be like this deep dive for 6 months into somebody before you can get to know them.
There's your mother's maiden's name is the same as mine.
You're like, bro, that's weird. I don't know how you know that.
Where's that level? Exactly.
Yeah.
No, nice curtains. Yeah, but I'll give you a concrete example. It actually paid off for me the other day. I grew up in Germany, so I'm fluent in German. And so one of the things I always look at is, do they list additional languages and what proficiency on their profile? Great. And then I reach out to them in their language. Or a couple of times I was dealing with a lady from Vietnam, so I started sending her messages in Vietnamese. Instant reply. It's
Did you talk about banh mi's? That's Vietnamese, right?
That's Vietnamese.
Oh.
Yeah. No,
so delicious.
It is very good, but I obviously didn't carry on the conversation, but by just simply using Google Translate, then you come up, make sure you do the reverse translation so that you don't send them a message that says, "Hey, you're a pretty elephant" or something. But that's a very simple example along the lines of Dallas Cowboys, where you can, if you do a little research, then you put them in buckets. Here's where it gets complicated. So now, you start out with a core segmentation. I want to sell into information security, and I want to sell to CISOs. That's your core segmentation. Maybe then you segment it by company size, small, medium, large. That's where most organizations stop segmenting. What you really want to do is you want to start driving the segmentation down further into both firmographic, demographic, but also psychographic criteria. The part where the scalability gets tricky, now you have within that, say, mid-size tech business information security CISO bucket, you might have 5 or 6 sub-personalities or sub-personas that you're trying to market to. And just the execution and the planning of those campaigns requires that you do a very tight project management. because am I running campaign 3B or is it 4A? And this guy's coming back and making sure it goes into the right bucket so that you can execute that at scale. This is where these guys are masters.
So Scott, tell me more about like the messaging and what's working, what's not working. How are you guys shifting? How quick are you pivoting messaging, right?
Yeah, so I'll just say this right now for all your listeners. Like the one thing that definitely we do not sort of advocate towards is sort of sending what LinkedIn tries to get you to use, which is in-mails, right? And for those who are just listening, an in-mail is basically a message you can send to a prospect that you're not connected with that also rings their email at the same time. And, you get a message, right? The thing is we don't see that working because 9 times out of 10, they're taking whatever their email copy marketing, whatever, putting it into LinkedIn and trying it that way, right? And going back to the sort of MLM sort of concept on Facebook, it's like you put yourself in the shoes of the other person. Now, numbers will increase your opportunity, right? So if you do enough of them, I'm sure you'll get lucky, right? But that's what we see doesn't work. And what does work is, coming in with being genuine, being short, being conversational, and coming in with a light connection message, and then having your follow-ups have some sort of open-ended question in it. If you're doing automation, you have your follow-ups have some sort of open-ended question in it, but also a little bit of a call to action if you can. Now, I will say this, how many times, so you get somebody to respond to your campaign. Let's say you have 5 follow-up messages and they respond to the second one, right? Now you have to go back and forth on this question. And how many times do you go back and forth until you feel comfortable enough to ask for that meeting? What we've seen is about 2 to 3. So once you've had about, you've sent out 2 manual messages to them and they've sent, 2 or 3 back to you. Normally about that time, you can sort of wrap it up and say something like, you seem to understand this a little bit. And, considering your background and where you're at, I would love to pick your brain on what we're doing here and get your feedback from your point of view, considering what you've been through. Would you be open to spending a couple minutes? And by that time, if you look at the conversation, you guys were talking about all kinds of different things, and you've bought that sort of report in. So to answer your question in short, doing about 2 to 3 back and forths manually, having your follow-up messages be very casual, interesting, and engaging, open-ended questions, and don't try to sell them right there, right? Try to have a conversation, be genuine in that case.
Let me ask you this. So I know I don't know if it still applies, but what they used to say in marketing or just sales, you have to touch base with the customer one way or another about the average of 7 times for them to actually buy your product or service. Is that still right? Is that, is that still about the same?
Yeah. First of all, there's the reality of it. Let's say you and I, let's do a little Duncan experiment. We'll go to downtown San Francisco. We're walking up and down Market Street, and we're going to talk to 1,000 people and say, do you want to buy a BMW or a Mercedes? Well, out of those 1,000 people, maybe 50 have positive feelings about, either BMW or Mercedes or whatever it is. And then of those 50, maybe 1 is now in a buying cycle. So chances are when you randomly approach somebody, the very fact that they're A, positively inclined towards your product or your offering, and then B, they have a buying need right then and there is very unlikely. And that's one of the reasons I see this over and over when companies run these outbound cold call campaigns. They hire 10 SDRs, they get a big honking email database, out it goes, and they're literally getting 1 to 5%, 5 if it's good, closure and conversion rates. Whereas if you have an inbound campaign, meaning where you put out the information, in this case we would maybe put out a sample car and have it standing there on Market Street, and now you monitor who walks up to the thing. Out of the 1,000, the 72 that are walking up to the car, chances are they're interested. So you're doing essentially the same thing. You're getting people to sort of show or approach you, and you monitor how close to the tent are they coming. And now I'm starting to connect with the ones where, they're hanging around, they're talking to their husband or wife, and you start getting a sense of their interests. And I think that's a big part of the difference. And you just sort of replace that process with the online equivalent, Web 2.0 or 3.0, to see whether or not you can find out who's interested, who's not, how do I sort the wheat from the chaff, and how do I approach them. But again, it's all predicated on don't push them. Like you said, be approachable, put out the honey, let them come to you, and then they'll come. And then as long as you make it easy to engage with you, and this is why I like these interactive videos. For example, they can click literally in the video and connect with you. Great.
It's what I love about Johannes actually, and what he has is your analytical mindset, and you approach things from a statistical point of view, right? And so that concept of whether they are positive responding to BMWs or Mercedes is and maybe one of them happened to be I'm actually working on buying a Mercedes right now, like, right? And so that actually totally makes sense. And with LinkedIn, like you get to have these conversations with your prospects. You can have meetings, you'll have discovery meetings, you'll have those first meetings. But in order to turn that in, if you're a large enterprise company and you have a 9-month sales cycle, to turn that into an actual sale is going to take a long time. It's not going to just happen right there on LinkedIn, right? It's going to take multiple other channels, methods, outreaches, and strategies, but people aren't paying attention to that social aspect.
Let me ask you this, and we're in the time where we are today. Is LinkedIn having LinkedIn meetups yet? Are they having middle meeting spaces where people can? Is there? Do you know anything about this? Because I feel like it would be perfect for this.
Yeah, I mean, other than they have their own version of quote unquote events, right? And they have their live things. Think Twitch. You were mentioning Discord before, so those as well. But I think all these social media platforms are looking for a new way to engage their audience, right? So they're definitely thinking about it. But no, at this time, no.
They have groups. I mean, you have LinkedIn groups.
Oh, that's true.
But that's
true.
all online, right? There's not
you mean
a
physical
LinkedIn
meeting?
happy hour going on, right?
You mean a physical meeting?
Yeah. Not yet, but I think
no.
that'd be great though. Even if it's once a month or once a week, and like-minded people can come. We could go and do a podcast at it and just sit and talk, the whole time. Or I don't know. I feel like there's
no. That's a great point. And actually, Meetup.com. I remember also when I was working with Sercio, and again, I was just really wanted to talk to somebody. I was looking up conferences and I couldn't find anything, but I found meetups, and I think we went to one at Visa, and it was amazing. I was like, this is a room full of our prospects. This is amazing. Oh my God, let's just talk to them.
I used to go to meetups all the time, and they had free food, free beer.
Yep.
And it was like at Google, right?
Yep. And what I love about Sercio is he's always push, and he's just so focused. And he goes, let's go talk to the head of this meetup or whatever. We go up and we talk to them, and they're like, yeah, you could sponsor the next one. Just buy the food, give us a venue, and we'll give you a speaking slot.
Yeah.
And then you're like,
I love it.
Oh my God. And we would do that all the time. And then we would promote it on LinkedIn. And yeah, it's definitely a match made in heaven. But no, I don't think LinkedIn's sort of promoting in-person events at this time.
I want to do more. I mean, this is why I have this event space, and we're going to have to be looking for a new one. But, with with Visual Street 3.0, what we want to do, that is definitely coming in consideration. I want it to be a room where artists and creatives and business owners and entrepreneurs come together, right?
I think I love the idea. I think you might also offer a video conferencing version of it, a Zoom product.
Sure, absolutely.
Because especially
so people can live stream it.
Yeah, here we are in San Carlos or Belmont, and it's.
Well, if we were live streaming this right now, and Sercio's telling us, who's asking some questions, that'd be super engaging, right? In real time.
Right. It depends. Yeah, no, I agree, and I think the one thing I was wondering if you could talk about last time we talked, you had a concept of actually I like the whole idea of democratizing what you do, because you're sort of the high priest. You know how to do video, professional production, high quality stuff, and so forth. What if I'm, say, a regional sales director and I want to build out my territory? Like, for example, I'm working with a friend of mine. He's the regional sales guy for a kind of an operational infrastructure company and his territory is the Midwest, Pennsylvania and Ohio and those places. So he's trying to put a tour together. The problem is he ends up being 2 weeks on the road. That takes him out of production. He's not going to hit his numbers. If he could do a virtual tour like that with the help of the kinds of things that you guys are doing, where he can help maybe do some video promotion, and then the actual event, and then you do the follow-up and so forth. I think there is a huge opportunity there, and it's not the big at the corporate level. You might even work with individual sales reps or regional directors or VPs of sales, for example.
You mean the
Any-
brick and
any
mortar
thoughts there?
ideas that we were talking about, like
Well,
where
the-
they
the
can use
mix
the
of-
services?
Both the brick and mortar, but also could there be a virtual version of it?
Yeah, no, I mean, and we're already working that on the Discord where there's creatives, where there's videographers, graphic designers, motion graphics, music producers, photographers. That's the network, but I'm also inviting business owners and entrepreneurs where we can conversate, and I want to open up my own business and flip it where you don't have to just go to me, but you can go into the thread of videographers or filmmakers or photographers or designers. You're like, hey, I need this, I need that, and for them a place to connect. The step further where Visual Street is kind of the hub for it. I would love to be. That's Visual Street 3.0, where we're the ESPN for this, where you can come to us. We're the hub of like what's going on, what's new, what's going on with Web3 and how artists can get into it. We're having those conversations on Discord about creating NFTs and NFT art, and I want people to be able to connect and then teach artists the business side, and teach and have classes for entrepreneurs, like how can video help and what kind of videos, like an about us video or a profile video on an employee, things like.
That's turning you guys into a destination, which I like. I think that's a good one where I can, hey, if I want to stay at the forefront of all things video, social, what have you, this is the place to come to, and I can promote myself, or I can get plugged into the scene.
Yeah.
But I also like your concept of, you talked about it, video as a service.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I see is, and we talked about this extensively, the old stuff is dead. Hitting the flying there and closing deals in the airport bar isn't going to happen.
Steak dinners, all that.
Steak dinners, events
That was
are
expensive too.
Exactly.
It's expensive.
Golf tours.
Events are, I've seen it over and over and over in organizations. Events are maybe great to renew business, but it's not good for net new lead gen. And, now people are more familiar with virtual and with social selling, digital selling, and so forth. You have this whole sea change coming over there. And what's not working, we're all clear on, don't go to events, don't do cold calling, don't send out cold emails, don't try to close deals in the airport bar. What is in is social, media, in particular for B2B, LinkedIn. And one of the things that is in is these new electronic formats. I can do a podcast, I can do a video, short form, 30-second, all the way to 45-minute webinar, what have you. And yet the average person doesn't have the wherewithal to start playing in that space.
Right. There's a
This
low
is
entry.
this is where you guys could come in, where you could have different offerings. Here's your little entry pack, here's your mid pack, and here's the full professional, thing. And talk a little bit about that, because I feel like a lot of people want to go into video and they would benefit from video, but they don't know how to do it.
Yeah, the content as a service is just the ongoing. I opened up my company doing that, right? And we just started adding services. I was doing just some videos and photography. Then I fell in love with podcasts and started offering podcasts, and then just doing virtual walkthroughs through Matterport, which is incredible. It's incredibly powerful. Residential's using it a lot, but venues should have it. Any venue that's trying to attract anybody, even restaurants, to show the space, it's great because it looks like you're walking through, whether you're on the goggles or iPad or your desktop. It's incredible, and you can embed video. So imagine walking into a venue and say you're trying to get married, right?
That's true. Trying to.
Right, and you see an open room, but you don't really picture it, right?
Sure.
Say you walk in and there's like an introduction. It's like the hostess, and she's like, "Hey, welcome to so and so XYZ, and we're really glad to have you here. We'll welcome your whole party." And then you get out of that and you keep walking. You go to the space and you see, like, you click and you see, like, this is what a wedding looks like that has a live band, or this is, and then this is a wedding.
Picture the furniture from your app and what it looks like, sort of thing.
At your house.
Yeah.
But you can do that. You can embed these videos or photos or anything. Or you can say, like, oh, well, we're not going to have a live band. It's going to be a DJ. This is what it's going to look like. Or I have 300 people. Is that going to fit? Well, this is what this room room looks like with 300 people, right? So you can really visualize it. I think it's going to really change the game, and it's completely unutilized. But now with what we've been through with COVID, venues are going to start to think about media in that sort of way, and being able to pick and choose. You don't have to throw everything into the whole kitchen sink. But a restaurant, for example, the same thing. An intro like, hey, welcome, let me get you a table. And you get out of there and you walk through, you go to the bar, and the bartender, you click on that video and it makes you this delicious cocktail. And you're like, when you see that, you're like, Or you go to the table and there's two people having dinner, and the video clicks and the server comes out with this flambéed New York steak or ribeye, and it's like, oh my God, yeah. And then the next phase is you can click right from there onto Open Table and you get a reservation.
That makes sense.
Well, that's the whole interactive thing, yeah.
So that doesn't exist right now, but I'm building it. So
Are you doing Meta?
that can be in Meta easily. Yeah, that can
Yeah,
be in Meta
'cause
easy. But I could do that from Matterport.
Oh, you can.
I can I've never seen it, but I can do that from Matterport. I'm trying to get a restaurant into doing it. So,
Yeah, but the piece that I'm interested in is that there's a gold mine for B2B use cases for, it's not the traditional, virtual real estate, tour through the house and all that good stuff, which has fairly high production costs. But something, again, if your user personality is a regional sales director and he's got a $3,000 or $2,000 budget, and you can get him into business where he has an infrastructure and a set of videos and a way of reaching out, I think there is a huge market for that, because then you stick out from the rest of the pack.
Yeah, and there's we have packages where it's the business startup, right? Where it's like a set of videos that can get them started, right? Something that'll get your website going, your social media. If anybody's clicking on your About Us page, it's not just one paragraph that's like leading nowhere. It's something like you're facing. You're like, hey, I love fixing shoes because, my grandfather used to do this and he fixed my shoes, and
personal.
Something personal. You're like, you know what? I'm going to go and first I need the service. Second of all, I like this guy and I've never even met him. That's scaling your story to a level that you couldn't before. If people meet me, I think, they get, I don't know, I feel like I'm an approachable person, but unless they meet me face to face, they would never know, right? Or you just watch this or listen to this, and then you can get an idea.
So I know you've actually talked about this. It's called Matterport?
Matterport, yeah.
So is it, help me wrap my head around this. Are we talking, it's obviously some sort of headset that you would have to have on, right?
No, it's a 3D walk. It's a 3D.
Through your laptop or phone or whatever.
Desktop, phone, anything. And so the way you do it is you have
go through an apartment.
You go through an apartment, but it looks like you're walking through. If you have the headsets, it's pretty cool. Some people don't, but it's pretty cool because you just look at a certain point and you're like, you go there. The step up, that's a cool technology, and it's virtual has been around for a while. It's gotten a lot better that it looks like you're actually walking through, and you can look all around 360 and you can zoom into certain things. A lot of construction companies are starting to use it because you can see progression, and you be like, this doesn't look good. This doesn't.
But what if
embedding of like content and videos, that's the next level of it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, what if I want to do content a presentation?
Yeah.
But instead of it's not the PowerPoint or Google Slides presentation. It's a walkthrough.
Yep.
And I think that'd be super cool.
So if you're trying to introduce your company, let's say you have headquarters, right, and you have an office, you do the same thing, right? The person at the door, they welcome you. It's a pretty face, or Sercio's there saying hello, welcome, and then you walk in and you go to the conference room, and if you want to find out about us. Here's the embedded content on that. If you want to hear about our services, here's this, here's that, all within one. And it's just, I think it's going to be incredible. You can, for us, we did one of our space, and when you walk in, it's our reel, right? Like showing our work. When you come into this room, it shows events that happen here, how people are utilizing the venue. It shows live stream capabilities in our services. You walk into the back and it shows, we have like a little 30-second video that shows us screen printing. I think it's super cool.
Would you consider this video or more or VR or
it's a VR? It's a VR
it's not
with
augmented
video.
reality because that's a little slightly different. But
it could be very easily once the technology catches up to it, you will be able to do that. Or let's say I have you in an event and you're here, and the augmented reality is, I don't know. I feel like the augmented. I think AR has such a bright future, even more than VR.
I agree.
You know, and from the comforts of your home, you can put on the glasses and you can feel like you're at the show.
Yep.
You're at the comedy. You can't come to the comedy show on Friday, but you will be able to see, feel it because you're right there. It's like this is the point of view. I'm really excited for this.
Is there a $500 version of this?
Yeah, they're well, that's super low end, but
what if you only make it virtual, not real? You just build a virtual.
Yeah, we can
but
do that.
The virtual world is actually a presentation. It's a story.
Yeah, there is a $500 version of it, and I know you were doing some videos with your phone. We can, let's say you did like a series of 3 or 4 just to get started, right? We can embed that video within that. So there is a $500 starting point with that. We have different packages that can put, get you in the game. That's what we want to do, and that's the reality. Once you get you in the game, you're going to want more. I know that.
Yeah, I think if you totally, I will. But I think if you can create meta or virtual world, whatever you want to call it, presentation. So it's not a walkthrough through a piece of real estate. It's actually sort of walking through concept space, walking through a presentation. And you can sort of say, see my metaverse ad or some such thing, and then just offer that. I want to try that. I think that's red hot because it's all about, I'm going to look different than, this corporate type over here. The way I present myself is much more innovative. And by the way, they can follow a story and it's delivered in a different way. I think there's just,
it just starts to get you to think about what else is possible out there. And this is really, we're talking about the cutting edge of where technology's not.
It's not quite yet there, but it's almost there, right?
Yeah. So it's that cutting edge, and I've been thinking about this a lot as it pertains. We're talking about walk through event spaces and promoting events. We're talking about presentations, and I think in general about lead generation. Scalability. I mean, what we're doing with automation and LinkedIn doesn't totally work in this case. Like, how if you were to be your metaphysical self in the metaverse that Facebook offers,
I think what works is, LinkedIn works best if you can feed them or you can attract them through a video. The percentage of videos that are in your feed are going up. Why? Because people engage with it. But having a video alone isn't enough anymore. Now you got to have something that's a little different. Meta, whatever it is, so that
imagine this. Imagine the next level of events or networking events. Imagine this: you walk into a meta space, right? You're in your headset, and a video is embedded in there, right? It's embedded, so it's like an introduction, and then you watch a conference. There's somebody live, right? Let's say they're on the stage live, but it's going out to all these people around the world. And then you have a break, like most networking events, right? And you're at the bar, and we talked about this before, just kind of something funny, where you buy somebody a digital drink. You're like, you look like a Johnny Walker type of guy, and you could either say, you know what, no, I've been sober for 10 years, don't fucking talk to me. It could be something like, you could say yes or no. But that if you say yes, buying a drink, and I'm not saying this in the real life, if you buy somebody a drink, doesn't mean they want to talk to you, men or women. But if you buy somebody a digital drink at a networking event, that kind of gets you the opening to talk to them and be like, hey, so it could be a conversation starter, right?
I love it. I love it. Do you want a glass of wine or you want a glass of beer? I guarantee you they haven't seen that as a come on, as an opener, and then you take them from there. I mean,
it could be we could work with brands we could work with Johnny Walkers of the world. We could work with. That's why like Adidas is in the game.
I love it. Yeah.
They're buying the Bored Ape Yacht Club. They're buying all kinds of assets. This will happen whether people like it or not.
This has been, this has been associated with video games for a really long time, right? With, buying skins, right? Different things. And,
And then we're getting anything out of it. You're just spending all this money just because you want to look cool.
So to your point, whether it's buying a digital drink or maybe buying a digital avatar party hat when you're at that event, right? That's going to be able to show that sort of swag or something like that. Right?
They're doing that merchandise,
Of course,
like at
yeah.
concerts. I mean, there's people that have had concerts within these metaverses where everybody's instead of like having 20, 30, 40,000 people, there's 500,000 people, and people are paying $10 to wear the shirt on their emoji. And you're like, why would I ever do that? It's just this thing. Why are people buying Bored Ape Yacht Clubs for Bored Apes for $1 million? It's accessibility, right? And of course representing yourself. Wearing the new shoes, whatever.
Yeah. Fathom about
I'm
these.
telling you, I think I'm really excited for it. But ultimately, what all this is going to do is just, I think the networking part of it, the bringing business together, working together instead of like, no, you know what, you do what you do and I do what I do and we're going to be separate. Working together as a team, I think we can get more honey.
So
I agree.
Produce more honey.
Yeah, I actually feel really strongly about this because what we're talking about and what Amped is doing and what Johannes is doing, working with us and whatnot, what we realize is like these concepts of being genuine. And you're asking me how many messages does it take? What is the messaging? If you really sort of boiled it down into what you have left in the pie, you take these same sort of concepts, and if you learn them, you're going to be able to apply them anywhere. Whether it's in real life or whether it's in the virtual metaverse as you buy these drinks, right? Mm-hmm. So coming in this sort of mannerism is going to be extremely important as we move forward. And that was the first part. And the second thing I really wanted to bring up, as I've been starting to realize, is your personal brand as it's perceived online. This is huge. So I've been starting to realize this, and it's like, yeah, you're going to have a Facebook, you're going to have an Instagram, and your Facebook's going to look like this, your Instagram's going to look like that, your LinkedIn's going to look something probably way different than both of those, right? And when you reach out to people, whether you're on LinkedIn, whether you're on the metaverse and you have that digital party hat and those drink tickets, or you're, on Facebook and getting hit up by MLMs, or Instagram as an influencer, right? All of those, we're starting to see, like, as I almost see it as like who you are as reflected online in general, right? And who it is that you're going to be perceived as. And I think a lot more people need to take this seriously, especially maybe like the older generation. Your friend who's a sales, director of sales. I think a lot of those types of people need to get out of that headspace of thinking the steak dinners and all these other things and start thinking, yeah, I do need to get online. Now, it doesn't mean cringe and like make TikToks and, all these other things, but just starting to get out there a little bit more.
I think that goes both ways. I think I was born in a time where I have the old school mentality. Sure. I'm born between two generations. I can put my head down and work, but I can also think about I love being part of like a tech environment. I played outside. I was analog and digital, right? Played video games as well, and I played a lot of sports. But I feel like the two can really teach one another about how to do business and what whether it's a digital handshake or a real handshake, what that really does, and paying attention to people. I feel like the younger generation just wants to do everything online, and there's a social aspect that still needs to happen where you actually get work done. And that's a different mentality. And I think when people get older, you get up to 30, 35, they start to understand that a little bit better. But the 20-year-old is different. Also, what you're saying is, like what you put out into the world, like as an Instagram, and you're just like saying or doing some things that maybe you wouldn't want to be represented as your brand later on. Yep. You need to think about that too. Right?
Yeah. You can never take it down. Yeah, I agree. There's one more thing that we haven't talked about, and I think that's a big, huge argument for this combination. The three-legged stool that we talked about. The upfront planning and tight analytics and tight planning, the LinkedIn-based and digital-based outreach, and then of course the compelling content and the ability to connect them. And that is when you put all that together. It's more effective than the traditional methods. You're going to meet more people. You're going to create better brand impressions. You're going to get more leads. But dollar for dollar, it is way cheaper than the old way of doing it, where you hired a bunch of salespeople that were pulling in 250, 300 grand a year, send them on the road, unlimited expense budget,
Sercio,
cold calling.
your ways are done, bro.
Yeah, exactly. And
Sushi dinners for. We once went to a dinner where I think we each paid like $500.
Oh yeah,
it was delicious.
And I run the numbers. I look at these organizations and I calculate out, how much does your sales organization cost you, and then I multiply out how many leads and how many pipeline they generate, and then you calculate something that's called a yield. If I put $1 into some lead source, how many dollars in revenue do I get out? And typically, all this digital inbound stuff, while it takes a longer time to spool up, once it's up and running, it's literally 2/3, 3/4 less expensive per dollar spent, or you get 3x more in terms of revenue than you get out of these traditional methods. And people, while they haven't put their fingers quite on it yet, are intuitively, certainly the finance departments are beginning to realize this stuff. It's like, look, I can't afford to have this outbound cold call sales force $500,000 a year and there's no pipeline. And then there's always the same story. The big whale is right around the corner, and so they buy themselves 3 or 4 quarters before they finally get fired. Versus this approach where you put out the honey, you use digital means, modern means, you think about scalability, all the things that we talked about in this conversation. And when you add it all together, while it's more sophisticated to build up than a traditional, hire by a big honking database and hire a bunch of salespeople, it is way more cost efficient than anything else.
Hey, Sercio, what's the cost for how much it costs to set a meeting with a CISO?
It's like $2,500.
Yeah, $2,500, right, or something around that, and it goes up and down, it fluctuates, and it's just so funny because I sit there and I think, we got this one client who sells a security software, and he just targets CISOs, and we have another client that only targets CISOs, and just seeing the meetings just roll in, and I think about what they're paying us, and it's just like, wow, like this is pennies on the dollar in comparison.
Well, you think about value. Look, we've had a conversation for 1 hour and 46 minutes, and it's been an ongoing conversation. There hasn't been a dull point. Johannes, just from memory right now, how many of these things, how many 15, 30 seconds, 60-second tidbits could we use?
Out of this one? At least 50.
Yeah, I think Sercio being the front doorman for your virtual metaspace is probably going to be the best one for.
I mean, look, the value right there. Look, we sat down for almost 2 hours, and how much we just talked about and hatched out that we can repurpose in a way. I mean, it's incredible.
Would you mind if I brought up one topic that's been on my mind? So, Johannes, you keep talking about with Europe, and you mentioned the whole, like, when you see somebody that's German, you're reaching out in German and whatnot. I have not experienced that so much. I've obviously done thousands and thousands and thousands of outreaches, right? But the European market has been interesting, and actually just internationally in general has been an interesting nut to crack, if to say the least. And so I was wondering maybe if you could maybe talk about your experiences, like have you seen it work a lot better in Europe? How does that work maybe with Europe versus Eastern Europe or Asia Pacific, or maybe down in Australia and whatnot? Like, what has been your experience?
You have to sort of apply 2 scales.
Sure.
The Asia, or actually I should say China, because it's different from the rest of Asia. I've done a fair amount of business in China, and I'm obviously very familiar with the U.S. The speed at which people are doing business is much higher than what you run customarily in Europe. I mean, there's exceptions. I'm talking about a distribution, but on average, things are slower. So if you apply that offset, the same digital techniques and the same content techniques work there. They just work at a lower rate. So if you benchmark against, what you're used to, say, in the U.S., and then you suddenly realize, oh my God, I'm not making anywhere near as much progress. But then if you compare that, these approaches that we talked about to more traditional old school approaches, it's way better. It's just the whole thing is slower because Europeans tend to be more risk averse. It's more consensus purchase, and there's significant cultural differences between them and, say, U.S. or then China, which is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah, the understanding the cultural backgrounds, and I think I remember I did a big stint for reaching out to people in the UK, and I was, to your point, I was just like, this is not yielding the same results. Why is that? And to your point, it was yielding results, but it was a lot smaller, and it's just understanding how to finesse that a little bit better.
Well, you have to put a lot more effort into the nurture.
True.
So,
That makes sense.
instead of 4 or 5 touches, it might be 10 touches, and it might take a year, and you have to put out, the same logic applies. Put out the honey, let them decide, give them control, the kinds of things that we've talked about, but it's just at a slower rate.
I want to finish off this conversation because I want everybody to do their, while I'm talking, your 30-second pitch about why should companies utilize AMP marketing, and why should companies utilize Primonio?
Yeah.
And then I'll say Visual Street, but patience is a virtue. Yeah, and 1 is greater than 0. Don't get down on the number of people that are, 1 is greater than 0, and just keep building on that. I think that is something we're always like, we're bypassing. We're like, oh my God, I don't have the 10 million followers. It's like, man, just focus on 1 at a time and building those relationships. That's a long-term thing. It's not just like getting them so quick. So with that being said, 30-second pitch.
Why should they?
What's your elevator pitch?
My elevator pitch? If you're interested in having a highly predictable, controlled approach to growth, and you want to make sure that you optimize your available budgets and resources, and then at the end of the year or end of the quarter, hit your targets over and over and over again, use our revenue growth planning system.
AMP's marketing is a platform that is going to allow you to make real human connections at scale and unlock the ability for your entire company to start prospecting, whether it's the BDR to the CEO, and really start to increase overall engagement and opportunities and more as it pertains to digital means.
And as fun as that sound on both of you guys are tripod legs that are needed, but we are the fun part, the content creation. We take care of business so we can have fun with creative, tell your story, reach new audiences, and really just network with people that you want to be in the same room with. Be at the table with people that make sense, right? Have a seat at the table that you want to sit at. Well, with that said, thank you very much for coming out. Appreciate it. This is the very beginning, gentlemen. I'm excited what Web3 and how we can really do business together. I think we can really do a lot together and build what we're doing. So with that being said, this has been Word of Mouth by Visual Street. And this is Chico. He is excited. Anyways, stay tuned, guys.
Word of mouth. Word of mouth.